Good morning, Gordy.
Good morning.
So, folks, welcome to Recruit Me. Today we have a special guest. We have Gordy Bonker II with the Bonker Beat. Gordy is currently managing as a recruitment consultant for Michael Page, specializing in the placement of accounting and finance professionals in the New York City market. Prior to Michael Page, Gordy spent the beginning of his career within a sales role in the consumer product goods industry after graduating from Smeal College of Business at Penn State University. Whoop whoop. Gordy is also the founder and author of his digital content brand, the financial blog, the Bonker Beat, where he covers topics including the economy, career advice, personal finance, and business news. So we're very excited to have Gordy today to talk about all things recruitment and what you all need to know. So welcome, Gordy.
Thank you so much, Kat. It's awesome to be here. Love the Penn State shout out. Very excited to get to talk a little bit about recruitment, the market. Might have to cover some Penn State, some Happy Valley news as well. But thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So let's dive right in.
Yeah,
Let's hear more about you so our listeners can get to know you a little better, aside from my little brief intro, kind of let us
yeah.
know about you.
Yeah. So, like you had mentioned, Penn State alum, that's where we got to meet. You and I were both line ambassadors of Penn State University. Absolutely diehard Penn State fan, very passionate there. When I was studying there, studied business. My first role within the corporate world was at M&M Mars Wrigley. So I interned there, basically within their category sales team. I was doing analytics focused on new product development for the M&M brand, which was really cool. And then upon graduation from Penn State, I had started my career with them as a territory sales manager. I was there for about 2 years, and then I made my first career move to Ferrero Foods, which is a competitor. Ferrero owns the Nutella portfolio as well as the U.S. Nestle chocolate division. So I worked for them for a year doing their forecasting analytics for their U.S. Nutella business.
Wow.
I made one more move after that over to Unilever. I was an international business development manager there, focused on basically the white space market of their beauty products. So brands like Vaseline, Dove, Axe. And I was only there for a little less than a year before I made my final move, which is here now as a recruiter at Michael Page, specializing in financial services. So I've been around the block, especially within the CPG space. Ultimately, I really wanted to get into a career that leveraged my communication skills more, the selling side of sales. For anybody who's really ingrained within the consumer product goods space, they'll know, especially in the beginning of your career, it's very data oriented on the analyst side before you move into customer relationship roles, honestly. And it was something that I was just very passionate about wanting to get into. It was a role that was really focused on strictly sales. I can remember that first role that I had at Mars Wrigley, the territory sales manager role, was probably the best role I ever had in terms of the skill set aligning to my personality, my background. It was a job where I was on the road completely by myself. I was selling in M&M's displays into grocery stores, having grocery store managers yell at me. But it was in that role that I learned the true fundamentals of sales, right? Like how can you build relationships? How can you identify what a market need looks like? How do you structure your day? How do you prioritize? These are all things that are extremely critical for my role now that I was able to learn early on. And I love that role. I think, when I wanted to make my move out of Mars, it was very difficult because I wanted to get a more analytical role to help round out my career. But I recognized that at that time, the opportunities that were coming to me were limited. Mars was merging with Wrigley. They were moving their offices to Newark, New Jersey. And I really wanted that analytical role. And that was my first time ever using a recruiter, was M&M, moving from M&M to Ferrero. I had an agency recruiter reach out to me. He had an analyst role at a competitor located here in New Jersey. So I had the conversation, and it ended up being a role that gave me exactly the skill set, the experience I needed to bolster my resume. And that ultimately made me more appealing for another role when I was the associate business development manager at Unilever. So, I've seen the benefits. I know we'll talk about job hopping a little bit later. I've seen the consequences of job hopping. So I've been able to see a lot of stuff before getting here now to help people make those career moves.
Absolutely. Quite the story, quite the kind of trajectory
Yeah.
to get you to where you are now. I think definitely gonna be interesting to hear from you then, having the experience where you personally had the benefits of having that recruiter, then turn recruiter. So obvious next question is,
Yeah.
how can someone leverage a recruiter and then really as a person, but then as a company, like what does that look like
Yeah.
for both sides?
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of highlight, I mean, what an agency recruiter does versus an internal recruiter, how to leverage, obviously, both of them. For all of you guys listening, I specifically now am an agency recruiter. I work for Michael Page, an agency recruiter. They have clients across an entire industry, right? So I have a number of clients across the major investment banks, hedge funds, private equity funds in New York, right? So I'll have a large network of different roles within a space. So, when you're leveraging a recruiter, one of the things you want to look for when using one to make a move is to learn about the network, or the overall industry that a specific recruiter covers. A recruiter is going to have hiring managers that they're aware of. They're going to know the ins and outs of what firms are growing and which firms are shrinking. I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about the layoffs that have started this year, but oftentimes recruiters are the very first to know. Sometimes they know even before the news comes out because hiring managers are starting to reach out to them to say, hey, we have something going on in the pipe where we're going to be laying people off or restructuring. We're going to need you guys. So you see it twofold, right? Exactly like you said. As a candidate, how do you leverage a recruiter to make a move? Well, they're going to have the network and the insight, the hiring managers that are going to be hiring. So I think that relationship is key in the beginning to leverage. But then as a company hiring, you are using an agency recruiter to buy into the market data to understand what are candidates looking for in this market, both from a compensation point of view, but also in terms of a benefits and a flexible working point of view. I feel pretty confidently in saying that I think the days of just putting a base salary number out there higher than the market and thinking that that's going to win talent is so far gone. The toothpaste is out of the tube in recognizing individuals' desire and ability to work on a flexible and remote working environment. So firms will use recruitment agencies to figure out what do we need to do to get the best talent, what's going on in the market currently. So a really strong recruiter is going to be able to provide all that information. But I do want to talk more too as well to how can someone leverage an individual recruiter to make a job move, because obviously I was able to do it early in my career and be able to advance, gain more responsibility. Each time I made a move, you're able to make more in compensation more competitively. So I think the best way in order to do that is to leverage, platforms like LinkedIn, and having a strong built out LinkedIn profile, being able to literally introduce yourself, self-promote yourself on LinkedIn, connect with different recruiters, people that are interested in a similar field or industry to you. Basically putting yourself in a position where you are getting the most opportunity to have recruiters see you, is going to get you the most opportunities in your inbox. The last thing I'll say as well, when it comes to leveraging a recruiter is responding to their messages, right? I'm sure depending on the industry you're in right now, if you go into your LinkedIn box, you probably have a lot of unanswered in-mail from recruiters. You don't know what the opportunity is on the other side of that message until you open it and click respond and introduce yourself. I think a lot of people sometimes, I notice, don't answer those messages, not because they have a problem with the person reaching out, but sometimes they feel like they might not be qualified for the role that the recruiter is reaching out to. And maybe that's the case. Most likely it's not. But that could also mean that having that conversation, you also be able to discover a different role that maybe wasn't initially sent over to you. I know for me personally at Michael Page, my team's working on anywhere between 20 and 40 roles at a time. So if I'm sending you a role, one specific job and you say no, well, how about the other 20 or the other 50 companies that Michael Page has worked with in the last 6 months? So I think that is one of the key pieces when you're thinking about when leveraging a recruiter.
Absolutely. I mean, I think all amazing points, but really with your last point there of it's opening a door. So you
Right.
have no idea what it's going to lead to. And I'm sure there's a constant stigma of, ooh, I currently have a job and, you feel guilty to answer back a recruiter, but it may not mean that you're going to leave that company right then and there, but you need to be
Right.
prepared for, like we'll talk about the layoffs, like you said, prepared for really anything. And I think this kind of ties into then my next question of, what's the biggest mistake really people make when looking for work? Is it this not leveraging of recruitment, or are there other things out there that usually you see happening?
Yeah. No, I mean, the easiest thing that comes to mind, because I experienced it firsthand, was making a move where a large portion of the motivation is strictly around compensation. I
Mm.
think, hiring is very expensive, and a firm's strategy sometimes is to just give a lot of money to get somebody into the door. And sometimes a large increase in salary, sometimes literally 40, 50, 60%, can make somebody just jump at an opportunity, say, that's just too much money, I have to take it. And then they're not thinking about, why am I making this move? Did I think about the culture and the people I'm going to be working with? Did I think about the longer term career trajectory of this opportunity? So I think the biggest mistake that people make is over prioritizing compensation. I think compensation is a very important aspect of any decision when you make within career, but it cannot be the driving factor. I think it's a summarization of a couple of different key points, right? I talked about it earlier, the benefits and the flexible remote working opportunity. Again, I feel very strongly that firms are going to win talent by giving people back their most valuable resource, which is time. So I think the number one mistake is to over prioritize base compensation. I'd say the number two mistake is not doing your homework in terms of what the industry is like, if you're moving into a new industry, and specifically what the role is going to play for that specific position. I can remember when I moved from Ferrero to Unilever, I was very focused on not having an analytical role. I did not want to be in Excel. I did not want to be doing the forecasting and the deep data analytics that I was doing over the last year. And, the title of Associate Business Development Manager was very salesy. Business development is sales. And I will say I wasn't very happy within that role. And I was really looking to make a move. Like, I just wanted to get out. I wasn't very internally happy. So I took it. And once I got into that role, and part of the reason why I wasn't there for very long was I recognized that it was still the same thing. I was still basically doing the same thing: revenue analysis, forecasting analysis, slideshows, Excel documents. I was not selling. I was not talking to the customer. So it was a very, realized point where I was like, I need to be so intentional about my job search and really understand, what does this role do day to day? So I remember when I started interviewing at Page, it took a couple months. Like, I talked to a lot of people. I was very intent on, what does this job look like? And I have used an Excel spreadsheet a handful of times since I've been here in the last 2 years. I talk to people all day. And the reason why I found success in this job is because I talk to people all day, and I know that I'm good at talking to people. So you have to think about, what is your skill set? How is it going to be applied in your day-to-day role? You need to be very clear about that. And it's hard, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are probably listening to this podcast because they are probably unhappy in their work and they're trying to find a new job. And as hard as it is, do not just jump at the first job that comes to you, which is another mistake that people make. That was the mistake I had made when I moved from Ferrero to Unilever. I believe it was the first blue chip type of name company that I can recall that came to me, and it was a move that I needed to get out of there. So I did learn from that experience, though, and I'm better because of it on the other side. It takes some time. So I guess those are all some different mistakes that you can make.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think great feedback for our listeners. I think a lot of them probably
Yeah.
have gone through similar things. And I think right now, with really all the layoffs happening around the world globally, I mean, it's crazy what we're seeing from outsiders' perspectives. I have, a colleague that works for Google, and, his insight and what he's been feeling with this is crazy to hear, because you're on the outside. So a lot of what you're talking about, people that are being laid off right now, or even just in general looking for work post COVID, what a crazy different world we're in.
Yeah.
So many people changing industries, so many people just trying to find work. And I think it's very easy to just jump at the first job, especially
Yeah.
if it's the right salary or even exceeds what they could expect they could be making. You see dollar signs, you see certain things, and you're just, it's amazing. It's like the golden ticket. But then, to your feedback and what you experience, it's not always, the golden ticket that's right for you, and it won't turn out to be really the right fit. So
Right.
with these layoffs happening, and from a recruiter standpoint, what are you seeing and what are you predicting? I know you don't have a glass ball over
Yeah.
there, but what do you think 2023 is going to continue to look like?
Yeah. Yeah, I get this question asked so much from people that are looking to make a move now because the uncertainty of the job market in the last 6, 8 months has continuously, increased. My outlook, I guess, for the remainder of this year is that I do think that the worst is behind us in terms of layoffs. I think it was something that needed to happen, especially within the technology space. The hiring trends over the last, if you just zoom out a little bit over the last 2 to 3 years, for a lot of those firms that were laying off a decent sized number of people, the the hiring trends were insane. So if Google laid off 10,000 people, I don't remember their specific number, they probably hired over the last year 50,000, or last 3 years 50,000. So there is like a certain level of rebalancing that needed to happen because of the aggressive hiring. I also do think that firms might have even overcompensated as you look forward in terms of the number of people they're laying off. I do think that this layoff season we're in is kind of like a free pass for firms to lay people off and make their balance sheets look more appealing if they're especially a publicly traded firm looking to get a better valuation in the stock market. I think if their competitors are laying off, even if they themselves don't really need to lay off, they're taking the opportunity to do it because they're cutting costs. I mentioned that I love writing about the economy, and there's a lot of really interesting facets happening in the economy right now as it relates to layoffs in the current situation that we're in. The latest jobs report shows a 3.4% unemployment, it showed 517,000 new jobs. That was almost 2.5 times what the estimate was to come in for that month.
Wow.
So unemployment is historically low. It's a 50-year low. The last time we saw unemployment at 3.4% was 1969.
Wow.
So we have a massive amount of open jobs. Now you can argue back with me that maybe it's not within the sectors that are laying off heavily, but there is still an appetite for hiring, which also translate into economic growth. The last 2 quarters of GDP have been positive. So a lot of people talk about a recession requiring 2 negative consecutive quarters of GDP. That did happen last year. But since that has happened in Q4 or Q3 and Q4 of last year, we'll see how Q1 of 23 looks. We have been trending in the right direction. So if we have the economy humming along, honestly, maybe some people think probably too strong, which is why we've seen interest rates continue to rise because people are concerned over the inflation. Then should we be considering the amount of layoffs that we've been having? I just wrote a piece about this on the Bonker Beat because I really do believe that a lot of employers might be regretting some of these layoffs come the end of the year when we don't see that nasty recession that a lot of them were forecasting when they were making these decisions to lay people off. I wanted to also speak on that inflation point. We are starting to see inflation cool. We've seen 6 months in a row of a negative trending inflation print. We've also seen wages are no longer rising aggressively like they were in 21 and 22. The U.S. Labor Department put out really good graphs. I could send them to you, Kat, if you want to, if you put this on video, but it shows that wage growth has been completely stabilized over the last 6 months as inflation has fallen. So we are not seeing wages contribute to the inflation number. Most of it is within shelter because anyone out there who's trying to be a first-time home buyer is seeing that housing prices and rent prices are drastically increased. I'm more concerned over the housing market than I am the job market personally. But that is kind of where the state, I guess I would say broadly, of the economy and where I think some of the directions are headed within layoffs. Will there be a couple more firms to lay off? Maybe. I know last week was KPMG layoffs, which was the first of the big four. Me specializing in accountant recruitment within the financial services market, that was very big news to me. I did have a number of people reaching out to me from KPMG. And am I going to be surprised if we see larger layoffs this week from EY, PwC, Deloitte? No, I could see that happening for that reason I was stating earlier. Well, if KPMG is doing it, then we can do it too. But I don't necessarily think that's the right decision. I know I'm talking to people within KPMG, within their audit groups, that are still working 70 to 80 hours a week. So you should be reallocating those resources to departments where people need them. But, the powers that be within those firms have decided that we are better off cutting costs for what they see as a slowing economy. But I don't necessarily know if I personally see that yet, but I'm not the one pulling the trigger up there.
Right. What do
So
those conversations look like for you? Like those, those employees reach out to you. It could even be someone that
yeah,
maybe you helped get that position. Is it fear? Is it concern? Is it the kind of thing where, they get it too? We've
yeah,
seen the world and the way that it's trended. I mean, it's funny you mentioned the housing market because me personally looking to be a first-time home buyer and looking
yeah,
around this last year into this year, and it's crazy. You flip back and forth between renting and owning, and the economy is definitely in a very interesting place for us as millennials to experience
yeah.
something that really no one's ever experienced. So back to the question, but what are those conversations like?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry that you're going through the home buying process because I know that stress is awful. And I'm sorry to anybody out there who's going through it because, especially in the New Jersey market, which I know we both are in, it has been so ridiculous. But to your point on what do the conversations look like when someone's reaching out to me, if they were impacted by layoffs, it's obviously, sometimes you're in this job just as much as a therapist as you are a career consultant. Uh, a lot of the layoffs for KPMG last week were of associates that were there less than a year. So a lot of the people there are fresh out of college. I'm talking to 22, 23-year-old kids. And um, they've never been laid off before. This is the only job that they've had. And there's certainly like a level of anxiety attached to that. So I do need to remind them that, listen, this is probably not even going to be the last time that you get laid off in your life. So in a way, be thankful that it happened when you were 22, 23. I still haven't had that experience happen to me. And I can recognize that, through the perspective of others, that if it does happen to me, as much as that it would suck, I realize that it's going to be okay. You're a smart person. You're going to find new work. I just mentioned to you that we have the lowest unemployment level in 60 years. Somebody is willing to hire you. You need to think about what do you want to do. So when you do get laid off or fired or just find yourself in a position where you didn't expect to be, sometimes you can look at that as an opportunity to say, what do I really want to get to use my time in my life doing? Because you only get one career and you want to make it as exciting as you can. So I do try to ask them questions. What did you enjoy about your role? What would you like to do next? And then we kind of game plan it out from there. Once they've kind of shared with me their concerns over, they're going to never find a job again. They're going to have to move back home with mom and dad and all these types of things. I try to lay out what type of opportunities that they could move into based on their prior experience. So if they have strong accounting backgrounds and they want to move into an internal accounting role, or they want to move into financial planning and analysis. Those are all different avenues that they could take. I'm more speaking specifically to an accountant here, but you want to be able to identify the things that you had some experience in, things that you liked, and then try to identify the firms that are growing or an industry that is growing broadly. So for me personally, sometimes it's difficult because as an agency recruiter, you don't typically help an accountant become a graphic designer. You help an accountant become a senior accountant because when you're an agency recruiter, you are hired by a client and a client is coming to you with a very specific need. They're saying, Gordy, we need a senior accountant, somebody coming from public accounting that has this specific experience because this is what we need today. And oftentimes a agency recruiter or an agency recruitment firm is going to make a percentage of the base salary. Typically anywhere from 25 even to 30% of the base salary of a candidate is paid at one time upon the placement of that candidate. So they're paying a lot of money to a recruiter to get exactly what they're looking for. So when you go to that client and say, hey, I have a graphic designer that wants to become an accountant, they're going to say, that is not what we're paying you for. Please get us the accountant. So a lot of times I get people that reach out to me on LinkedIn that don't have the background of the firms that I'm recruiting for. And it's difficult because you want to be able to help everybody. And I've been in that position where I myself made a career change, but an agency recruiter is really specialized in a niche and they help increase somebody within that specific career trajectory. So it really depends on what my bounds are to be able to help you. And if I can't, then I'll have to introduce you to maybe somebody else that is within that space or has a network of people that they may know. But that's a lot that covers a lot about what that conversation looks like and a little bit more about what I do. But I think that is helpful for those out there that maybe haven't had the success of using an agency recruiter. It might not be anything personal to you. It might just be about the background or experience that you have and what a recruiter can use or leverage from that, you know?
No, absolutely. Yeah, great points as we've had. So you mentioned job hopping earlier, and
Yeah,
saying these 22, 23-year-olds are the ones mainly being laid off right now.
sure.
I think it's obvious that our parents and our parents' parents, you had one job, you stayed with it, and you really
Yeah,
only changed jobs if something happened, if there was an economical change, if there was, a move.
yeah,
Fast forwarding to our generation, it's becoming more normal for that job hopping. But I know a lot of companies where they look at a resume, they see, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, even 2 year, 2 year, 2 year, and they're thinking, all right, I'm
yeah.
only getting 1 or 2 years out of this person. Is it worth it? So, these layoffs happening to these younger individuals, I think they're going to have a negative, surrounding of that thought process of, I need to keep changing because companies are going to keep changing. So, what do
Oh
you
man.
as a recruiter see? If you see a resume with a lot of different opportunities, is it something to leverage? Is it all about how you explain it? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. That skill set of being able to explain your moves will be increasingly more important as you go into your career. But you mentioned before, and I really wanted to hit this point home, that job hopping has become normal and the time in role has significantly decreased. So the baby boomer generation, the average time in role for a baby boomer was a little over 8 years. Okay, so then you move down to the Generation X that came after them, and they were around 5 years, 5 months in that time frame, right? And then you move down to the millennials. Their average time in role is 2 years and 3 months, 2 years and 5 months.
Wow.
And now the Gen Z generation is coming out into the workforce, and we already recognize that their time in role is 2 years tops. That is the average, right? Right there is 2 years. So you're seeing this decrease the time in role that a candidate is going to stay at their firm. And things are changing a lot faster. People are moving into opportunities a lot quicker. So, yes, I think there's a pro and con to job hopping. On one hand, if people are making these moves and seeing success at each of those firms and being able to speak to their experience and the things that they've been able to achieve, then you can make the argument that these people are adaptable. They can recognize a new system, a new company, new people, and be able to achieve exactly what they want to accomplish mutually for the firm in a short amount of time. And I think that is going to be very appealing to hiring managers. Now, the leadership that currently exists in corporate America is of the baby boomer and Gen X generation, right? These are people that have been in their roles 9, 10 years. They do not have the warm and fuzzy feeling about job hopping. They themselves did not do it. And the negative connotation is, I can't trust this person. There isn't a track record of long-term placement at a firm. I don't want to hire them. For specific industries, that will plague a candidate harsher than others. I've seen accountants move a couple times within public accounting firms, right? So the structure of public accounting, you've got small public accounting, mid-tier or mid-size, and then your big public accounting firms like the big four, EY, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG. So oftentimes people will move from small to medium size, then to big. So they might make 3 moves in 3 years, but their goal when they reached out to me and told me when they made those moves was I was trying to get into a big four firm. That's excellent. You did it. So now let me introduce you to XYZ bank or hedge fund in order to make your move. I think there's going to have to become a little bit of a mindset shift in senior leadership and how they view job hopping. Because as the baby boomers and even the Gen X start to retire or exit the workforce, the millennial generation, we are the ones who made job hopping mainstream. We pushed forward and said, no, like we are going to prioritize the individual. We are not going to have brand loyalty. Yeah, we're doing this. And so we paved the way for that. And we're seeing Gen Z now even have less of a, I guess, acceptance of anything that they don't get out of their current role. They are going to keep that in mind if they want to make a move. So the millennials now, as we start to enter the C-suite, are going to look at resumes and really be interested in terms of the background experiences that they had and want to meet this person, because if they are able to speak to their moves well, they speak to their experience well, they present well, then they're going to be hired. A millennial is not going to care if they made 5 job moves in 8 years. If they worked for great companies, they accomplished excellent things, and they've always put themselves first in their career. So the mindset of job hopping will change, and it will change as the generations change within leadership. I think for the current state of things, I I think it's still going to be a challenge for certain people in industries. I know for us, when we look at resumes, especially within the finance industry, for senior level searches currently, it's very hard to place a senior level person in the finance field if they've moved a lot of places. The current hiring scheme within the financial services landscape does put that into a high effect when making decisions. And I do think about the long-term impacts of that as people make all of these moves earlier in their careers, right? What Gen Z and Gen X are doing. Eventually, that transition into senior leadership, someone has to look at them and say, I trust this person to lead a department and carry out and execute maybe a 3 to 5 year project or a 5-year transformation of this group. How can we believe that they'll be here for that whole time? And that becomes an interesting challenge in the current state of the way things are. I don't have an answer to it. I think oftentimes those people are being passed on that have a lot of job moves for roles that are focused with that long of a tenure. But I do see the acceptance of job happening, growing as we go. I mean, just the numbers themselves don't lie. I think that will carry the kind of the narrative is we take the reins, Kat, when the millennials are here to stay.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. But no,
Yeah.
it's interesting the perspective because I think it's changed so much. And me coming out of a corporate role, I had a negative stigma around it. I would look at a resume, and if I saw constant hopping, that was already a red flag. Now, I would always ask, walk me through your resume, explain to me kind of these moves, and depending on what those answers were, depending on what each trajectory was, and sometimes I think the way you're positioning your resume can explain some of those questions I may have prior to, or anyone may have prior to me having to ask those questions, which is a whole other conversation. But you definitely could kind of win me over, and I'm sure others too, but it definitely creates kind of a moment of pause. So with that being said, what would you say is maybe the best piece of advice, or what kind of advice would you be giving to someone right now looking for work, looking for either a new job, a change, what does advice look like?
The best advice I can give somebody is to put yourself out there. And I think that comes in the form of networking, but it really comes first and foremost, getting your LinkedIn profile completely optimized. We'll talk in a minute about some of the resources and stuff that I have that you guys can find that are listening. But I have a free guide to just optimize your LinkedIn profile. Have your description set, the experiences that you've had within your role written out in the experience section of your profile. Connect with as many people in the field that you want to work in as possible. Connect with the people that are at the companies you want to work for. And when I say connect, I don't just mean send them a connection request and cross your fingers that they're going to accept and say, man, Bob looks incredible, I'm going to hire this guy. Add a note with the connection request saying, hey, Jim, I really interested in working at X company. I have a background that I think could be excellent for the role that you're currently hiring for. I actually applied to it. I look forward to hearing from you. And you do that 50 times a day at different companies you want to work for, you are going to find a job that excites you, that is in the industry you want to work for. But it requires work, and it requires first and foremost having an online brand presence that is excellent. And that is what a lot of people are missing right now.
No, that's amazing. I'm glad to share that with the listeners so that they have, something to kind of fall back on and really leverage that, because I think LinkedIn kind of falls into that social media aspect. Sometimes it can be scary for some. And if you don't feel savvy, it can be kind of daunting. I talk to so many people who say, I create the LinkedIn profile and then that's it. It's there.
That's it. Yeah.
It's collecting dust. I don't do anything with it. It's just the fact that I have one, and that's not enough. So it's great to hear from you that, definitely have to utilize it more.
Yeah. And write engaging content, post your thoughts on what's happening in the market or whatever industry you want to work in. Start sharing your insights about that industry. You'll be surprised what opportunity can unlock itself for you.
No, absolutely. So the title of the podcast is obviously Recruit Me. It ties into an app. So, what does Recruit Me mean to you? What does that phrase mean to you? What can you say to our listeners about that?
I think Recruit Me to me means, how do you promote yourself? How do you put yourself out there to tell someone, recruit me, bring me in? I think so much of a job transition or a new job process requires the ability to promote yourself, talk about all of the things that make you special and make you a perfect reason why this company should hire you. So it ties back into that LinkedIn comment I made earlier. Build a brand and a profile that makes someone want to speak to you. And when you talk to people, remind yourself of all the skills and experiences that you do have and how that can be applicable to the opportunity that you're talking about. Recruit Me is all about confidence. It's about trying to focus on the things that you can control each and every day and bringing your best self forward. So when I hear that, that's what I think about.
Thank you. I agree. Definitely hit the nail on the head. Didn't have to pay you to say that. Oh, only teasing. Perfect. Exactly. No, it's definitely that premise of putting yourself out there. And I think the day and age that we're in, if you're not doing that, then you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you
Totally.
so much. This has been
Yeah.
fantastic. I definitely want to make sure that people can kind of get to know more about you, have more resources from
Yeah.
you. So where can people find you? Where should we
Well,
send them to?
every day I write on LinkedIn, every day about what's going on in the market, business news, or just general career advice. So please connect with me on LinkedIn, add a note, say hi. I'm Gordy Bonker II. So Gordy Bonker II on LinkedIn. My blog is thebonkerbeat.com. You can subscribe right when you hit on the homepage. There's a big button that says subscribe. You'll get my weekly newsletters and blogs about the economy or the job market or career advice, emailed directly into your inbox. So sign up there. On my homepage for thebonkerbeat.com, I have free resources for people like resume templates, and I have the free guide to optimize your LinkedIn profile. I have helped people build their LinkedIn profiles as well in the past. So if people need help with that, there's information there that you can reach out to me on how I can help build a LinkedIn profile for yourself. But ultimately, yeah, super accessible. I do plan on building out more of a YouTube and podcasting presence in the coming year. So I'm excited for that, Kat. You'll have to come on and talk a little bit more about your journey. So that's where you can find me. And yeah, this was awesome today. I love getting to talk about it.
Thank you so much. Really great stuff. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you're watching live, then this is also in podcast form. So if you want to listen to it again while you're driving, always definitely recommend. And thank you again so much, Gordy. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Talk soon.